time. The climate is changing and we need to act right now. So I know what you're all thinking. What can we do, right? Well, scientists says we need to consume less and we need to consume better. So today we're going to be in my coffee shop that's called The Next Era. It's going to be my proposition for a better future because I believe we have to work together as coffee consumers and coffee professionals to think different. Hello judges and welcome to The Next Era. The two geishas I'll be serving today both comes from Colombia and they gather all the important ingredients for a sustainable recipe. First of all, they grow in a tropical forest, a rich multicultural environment that leads to a complex and aromatic cup. And they are both fermented with natural carbonic maceration that is less greedy in resources and energy. Those two geishas from Nestor Lasso of Finca El Diviso and Jairo Lopez of Finca La Esperanza are really beautiful on their own. But by making them work together, as we need to work together, they create such a unique cup of coffee that makes me able to showcase the concept of the next era. So today, we're going to make a blend. After harvesting the cherries, harvesting and sorting the cherries, Jairo Lopez places them in a seal tank to start the natural carbonic maceration. Here, the juice produced for the first 2 days is cooled down and put back in the tank to make sure the fermentation happens at around 15 degrees. This in order to develop a refreshing flavor profile that today you will be able to feel as grapefruit, white grape, blood orange, and ginger. Then, 4 days later, the fermentation is complete and the coffee is getting to dried on a raised bed for 25 days in order to preserve those aromatic compounds. And we're going to use 70% of this refreshing coffee as a base in our blend. Now, on the other hand, Nestor Lasso starts his process by oxidating the cherries in an open-up tank for 48 hours in order to lower the pH and start the development of lactic bacteria that today you will feel as a smooth and silky texture with a higher perception of sweetness. Then, after salting the cherries in some cold water, he creates a thermal shock using water at 50 degrees in order to start the development of those lactic bacteria and open up the pores of the coffee. Finally, he places the cherries in the seal tank to start the natural carbonic maceration. And here, the fermentation will take place at 25 degrees for 38 hours. A perfect environment for Saccharomyces cerevisiae, a yeast that Nestor adds to the tank and that will help to develop a refreshing flavor profile. A red fruit profile, sorry, correction. Today you will feel as strawberry and raspberry. Lastly, the cherries are dried on the shade for 15 days. And we're going to use 30% of this coffee for its intensity and sweetness. Now, judges, this is how we consume better. But to consume less, please take a look at the graph on the paper in front of you. According to a recent study, 74% of the total consumption of coffee is actually the consumption of coffee itself. In the next era, we care about our consumption. So today, thanks to the blend of those two specific geishas, I'm able to deliver a lower dose of espresso using only 17 grams in for 44 grams out, brewed at 93 degrees. But to do so, I had to ask my roaster to develop both those coffees for at least 100 seconds in order to get some solubility. Then, to avoid channeling, I use some needles to distribute the grind evenly through the puck. This to ensure stability during extraction. With this recipe, judges, you will get some notes of, please write down. On the first sip, you will get a citric acidity combined with notes of blood orange, raspberry, grapefruit with a floral aftertaste. On the second sip, you will get a good sweetness combined with nuts of strawberries, white grape, and a tartaric acidity with the fresh ginger aftertaste. You will have a medium body with a smooth and silky texture. All right, judges, I will ask you to first evaluate the crema, but wait to drink it, as I'll place a lid on top of the drinks that will keep the volatile compound intact while the espresso cools down to the perfect temperature. So please, right now, just evaluate the crema, but don't drink it yet. There you go. That's for you. That's for you. And please. So judges, by working on the distribution technique, the dose, and the development time during roasting, I'm able to deliver a more consistent, more even espresso with a higher extraction yield and all more accessible. All of this while saving 20% of product compared to a typical espresso recipe. And this to me is the next era. So now, as I remove the lid, please stir the espresso 5 times and you can place the spoon in the cup in front of you. And please enjoy. All right, judges, let's move on to the milk course. For your milky beverage, I use the recipe of 1 part of espresso for 5 parts of milk, steamed around 55 degrees to highlight the fruity and floral profile of this espresso. It will get you some nice notes of banana bread, a vanilla caramel ice cream sensation, and a lavender finish. You will also have a sweet, rich, and buttery texture, as I also freeze distill this milk to 40%. Please enjoy. Here, we're using some extra shots, as I believe the oxidation reduces the perception of bitterness and rise up the perception of sweetness, but mostly, it's a fantastic way to avoid the waste of espresso shots behind the bar in the next era. Now, judges, choosing the type of milk I would use for you today was quite a challenge, considering the carbon footprint. And yet, you're about to drink some co-milk. I know it sounds like the worst scenario, right? But let's dive into the production of co-milk for a second. Instead of eating cereals imported from the other side of the planet and living in giant sheds, those French co-milk called the Froment du Léon only eat grass, living in the field and participating in keeping the wetland alive. They create organic matter into the soil and are stocking carbon. In fact, those Froment du Léon almost disappeared in the middle of the 20th century because they were not productive enough for the industry. Only 6 liters a day of a sweet, intense, and rich milk you will be able to experience in the next era. So please enjoy the sustainable milky beverage. All right, judges, I think we did it. I think we consume less, and I think we consume better. So let's celebrate the next era together. Champagne, anyone? In France, we often drink champagne with blackcurrant, and it's called a royal kir. So today, we're going to use 8 milliliters per drink of a lacto-fermented blackcurrant syrup that I made out of jam. I used a recipe of 100 grams of jam that I diluted with 40 grams of water and 1 gram of lactic ferment, and let this to sit for 6 days at 25 degrees. This fermentation is going to create a syrupy texture, body, and a new note of fig. If you could please write this down. Then, my espressos, of course. Cold and combined with the other ingredients, they turn into a new note of quince. If you're not familiar with quince, it's similar to apple. But once I've made my espressos, 10% of the organic matter remains inside the coffee puck. So, to extract what's left of it, I've led to infuse 50 grams of a used coffee puck with 30 grams of kefir grain and 30 grams of date sugar made out of wasted date. All of this with 500 grams of water for 3 days at room temperature. Then I filtered this and placed it in this bottle for a second fermentation, 6 days at 25 degrees. And this fermentation is going to create a sweet, lightly acidic, and fizzy drink that reminds me of a champagne. And we're going to use 50 milliliters of this per drink, as this creates a new note of pear cider. Perfect. So judges, as a reminder, you will get some notes of pear cider, quince, and fig. You will have a refreshing and fizzy drink. There we go, perfect. Finally, judges, I wanted to reuse the milk from your previous course to create, with the help of xanthan gum, sugar, and nitrogen, a nice emulsion that will bring volume and texture on top of your drink. Plus, this emulsion is going to create the tactile sensation of a marshmallow. Judges, I would like to thank you, all of you, for letting me the opportunity to showcase the concept of the next era. Before you take your first sip, I would like everyone to raise its glass. Please, raise your glass. And let's cheers together for the next era and the new good practices. Cheers, santé. Time.
Give it up for the competitor representing France, Brice.